So I'm really excited to meet you and speak with you. I've been uh, looking through all the body of your work, and it's really inspiring. And I'm really excited to find out a little bit more about it. So just to kind of introduce you, you're originally from Zurich, Switzerland, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, wonderful. I think there's a little delay with the internet. Um, and you kind of started pretty
Yeah,
young.
right.
Can you tell me just a little bit about your background? Can you hear me okay?
Sure. Well, I come from, yeah. Well, as you mentioned, I'm coming from Zurich, from Switzerland, and uh, well, my father used to play guitar and bass, and was just listening to a lot of music. So music was around the house, but although my parents weren't in the music business, or they were no musicians, but music lovers, or they just enjoyed being around music. So I have two younger brothers. We all play instruments, and yeah, that's the short version.
Yeah, so why clarinet? What made you want to pick clarinet out of all the instruments?
Well, I remember at school there was the orchestra playing. Um, I guess you guys in the US say Waldorf school, right? I went to
Mhm.
Waldorf school.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of arts and like painting and working on wood. It just it came in very handy because I loved all those kind of things. And I remember the orchestra was playing, and there was one part where the clarinet hold a note or held a note or changed to another note, something. I just think that sound captured me, and yeah, from that's how I actually started after that.
Yeah. That's great. And where did you study after? So you went to the Waldorf school, and then I know that you got your master's from the Zurich University of Arts. Tell me a little bit about your education background from
Mhm.
there.
Hmm. Well, they have a jazz department, uh, and I went there. But the good thing was that you had to study also classical for the first 2 years, and I think that's. I mean, speaking of the clarinet, it's very essential. I guess that you have some just fundamental uh, lessons about the clarinet and about the technique and all those books that are out, and the repertoire for the instrument. And so that's so I had a chance to study classical clarinet a bit, but focusing, of course, on the jazz education that I had.
Yeah. So was it always
So
your first
that
pa
was great. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Was it always jazz for you? Did you just know that jazz was the style you were going with, or were you did it just kind of work out that way?
Well, I loved all kinds of music, but it came down to jazz. Yeah, and I had when while a teenager, I already had a lot of records, and I was playing with some drumsticks on my bed, and somehow wanted to make music. And yeah, it was all about jazz pretty early on. Let's say maybe 12, 13, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. And when did you begin getting interested in incorporating sounds and styles from different traditions around the world?
Well, that evolved over many years. I had just to have a lot of projects, so you so that you have enough work, right? So basically, I tried to think like that. So I had like a swing band that plays the music of Benny Goodman. I had my band that's playing my compositions. Just have different hats, and and that also happens with other styles. So I played like a bossa nova program. I played a world music thing, and it was out of interest, but also out of being able to be in demand for different things. You know.
Yeah. Well, you certainly have a diverse um, uh, number of groups and diverse kind of career. But before that, one of the things that really struck me when I began listening to a lot of your music was your sound. And I was wondering,
Mm.
well, something for me, it's very smooth sounding. There's a velvety quality to it. It's very warm. And I think a lot of people associate very sharp sounds with jazz clarinet, but it's kind of like, to me, like liquid when I listen to you.
Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
you mentioned that. Thanks for that.
yeah. So, what kind of like to know is where did you get your inspiration for your sound? How did you develop the sound and kind of what influenced you? Were there particular clarinetists that you gravitated to as a young person uh, that informed how you play?
Mm. Well, I'm fascinated with the classical clarinet sound. So, like, we all talk about the dark, round, centered, whatever you call it, sound of the clarinet. So that's basically what I'm striving for too. I have to plug in that charge, excuse me. And so I'm doing a lot of classical oriented practicing, just to have an idea how it could be, and like playing scales, arpeggios, or it's a lot of classical oriented practicing that sets me free at the end to make the music I want, which is more improvised stuff. Yeah.
So, what kind of, you say classical, are there particular exercises that you do or etudes or pieces, excerpts that you play that seem to center you before you go into the improvisation and the music you want to be making?
Yeah, definitely. There is years ago I kind of prepared my warm-up program, which is, let's say, more or less an hour, and it's close the scales through all the keys, right? Major, major, minor, major, minor, through. So I memorized that. I'm playing that by heart, of course. And then there is Fritz Krebs, last page through all the keys with triads, with arpeggios. I memorized, I learned by heart that one too. So wherever I am, at home or when I'm on tour, I just kind of warm up all the time with those things ready. And yeah, so basically those things are quite constant with me all those years through all the keys. And then of course I came across Berman and all those dozens of technique books about, I mean, literally every clarinet book I could find about playing, about how to work on the reeds. I mean, there's not too much out there, but the things that are out there somehow I downloaded or bought or yeah.
All right, great. And did you have any clarinetists jazz clarinetists specifically, that you were listening to, that their sound inspired yours or their artistry inspired your projects and your development as a player?
Yeah, I listened a lot to Herb Hall and Edmund Hall in a more traditional jazz sense. And then, of course, Benny Goodman and Artie Shaw. And then I got hooked to more modern playing, like Eddie Daniels does it. So there were a couple of guys, like the main guys, that I felt. Yeah, of course, I went deeply to them and listened, transcribed, and so that was Buddy DeFranco.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. I grew up uh, listening to Eddie Daniels. I lived in Albuquerque, so sometimes I'd go up to Santa Fe and take some lessons with
Mhm.
him, though I doubt he remembers me, but yeah.
Oh,
I
great.
actually hear a lot of the
That's great. I,
smooth,
I was there too, yeah, many years ago.
yeah, I hear a lot of the smoothness that Eddie is able to
Mm.
achieve in your sounds, which is why I thought to ask. So
Uh-huh.
let's talk just a little bit about all kind of the diversity of the projects that you have. You have, and correct my pronunciation if I'm incorrect, but you have your quartet, which plays more like it's kind of traditional jazz, but in a modern setting. And then you have the ethnic trance
Mhm.
trio. And then the one that I'm super excited to talk about was is Spiketronics.
Yeah, right. That's right.
Yeah. Can you tell me just a little bit about each of your bands and
Uh,
how they formed, and the kinds of goals you have with them?
mhm. Yeah, sure. I mean, it's well, different bands as I mentioned before. Like there's like I have this Benny Goodman tribute band. It's called Pennies from Heaven because there's a famous song Pennies from Heaven. There we play all those hits from that. We play also, I mean, not right now, but for dances, for dancers and for dances, and just because it's such was just such an important time, that swing era with the clarinet with Benny Goodman. So we play that kind of music, and but then of course I think it's important to compose yourself to find somehow maybe your way of playing jazz. So I started writing. I don't know, maybe around 20, and so we'll play my music, so to speak, and what was the question? I
Oh, yeah.
already forgot.
Just tell me a little bit about each one of your groups and kind of
Yeah.
what are the goals and what are some of
Mhm.
the projects you're working on?
Yeah. Well, I just enjoy playing different kinds of music in general, and so I have an outlet for all my tastes, right? So I have this funky band with where I have effect pedals for the clarinet, which is very inspiring because the sound that's coming out is totally different than the regular clarinet sound. So that's a lot of fun too. So and different venues that you can play with a band like that, right? So you can maybe play like a club that has more, let's say, rock and roll or groove kind of things going on. So it's a mix. For me, it's well, what I personally love to do, and also what I sell at the end to play gigs. I found to make a living. Yeah.
Hmm. When did you form Spiketronics? How long have you been playing with this group?
Well, the lineup was different the, with the musicians, but I guess it quite was one of my freshest projects, my newest. Maybe 2016, I would say, somewhere around that. I jammed with different musicians and tried to form the group.
Okay. Um, we're going to come back to the other groups, but what I'm really interested is what did you at what point or what made you think I'm going to make the bass clarinet fit into a funk group? Like what was your thought process and how did you come up with that sound?
Well, there is a great tenor player and bass clarinet player as well that I had on my interviews as well, Bob Minzer. And this was in the 80s when he played with Jaco Pastorius and Randy Brecker, and they all used some effects, and so I think that's what this was back in my mind somehow, that this kind of sound, and then I tried different pedals, and the one sound that you're referring to, I think it's from a electric bass pedal that I got it out from, and it's just a great thing to play loud on an instrument that usually is not that cannot be really heard when you play with the drums, with the drum set. And so it was just my kind of electric project that I went into and had a lot of fun
Are you still, I
making
mean,
different sounds and.
oh, sorry. Um, are you still playing with them? I know the pandemic has halted a lot of things, but do you have any future projects with that group?
Not right now because I dislocated from Zurich, Switzerland to St. Petersburg, Russia, where I'm living with my wife. So there are no plans at the moment. Well, I used to go back and forth, but no, not right now. I'm playing jazz here in St. Petersburg, some jazz gigs with new people, and I might play that program of the repertoire of Spiketronics, but with a different rhythm section.
Okay. Um, Now, I'd like to talk just briefly about ethnic trance. I know that you started with somebody in Russia, and it kind of came out of your travels from Russia. Can you tell me a little bit about that group
Mm-hmm.
and how it forms and some of your goals with that group?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, love to. Um, Back in 2015, there was a big project that I was glad to be part of. It was a big tour in Russia, going from and if you know the size of the country, it was going from the left side to the right side, basically, which was 2-3 months tour and 70 some odd um, concerts with people from all around the planet. We were basically stuck with each other in a bus and collaborated with each other spontaneously, um, night after night. And so this Russian musician Maxim Gudimir, he was there too, and I was there too, and we were both kind of alone, and we didn't come with our entourage and with our own band, so we ended up playing together as a duo, and then later on expanded as a trio, and then divorced from the drummer, and then continued playing as a duo. That's why you also find a lot of ethnic trance duo clips on YouTube, for example, and recorded an album with the drummer, and so that's the story since then. And then every year he came to Switzerland. I organized a tour, and I went to Russia. He organized a tour, and so this baby is also 5-6 years old now. Yeah, that we played together.
Yeah, and now you're both in Russia.
Yeah, coincidentally, it's funny. We are not really in touch at the moment, but he lives just one village down the street. But that's how life is, right?
Um, So, what are some upcoming projects that you have, and how has the pandemic affected how you are making a living and gigs?
Luckily, that in St. Petersburg, or maybe in the rest of Russia too, I'm not so familiar with that. But of course, there are restrictions and but not so tight. So I used to play gigs all the time in clubs, and so actually there was so I had the good fortune of being here than in Switzerland, where everything is closed and nothing is happening. So that worked out well, but who knows what the future will bring. So I didn't plan too much ahead. So I'm kind of well, actually, it's early on, as I mentioned, I had different projects going on because I love different kinds of music, but also because it creates different opportunities, right? So, and the same is with the income. in my case, I also doing some studio work from time to time, playing on a movie, or when my composition is played for my CDs on the radio, I'm getting some royalties from there. So I try to create that income, that money flow from different various angles. And but of course, I also lived from my savings.
Yeah, that's great that you're still able to gig. I did see some videos of your gigs on your Facebook page, and a lot of people dancing. It was really
Mhm.
exciting. I look forward to having that where I am. So what would you
Mhm.
tell,
Yeah, that was fun.
yeah, what would you tell a clarinetist who wants to get into jazz, wants to begin improvising? What kind of advice would you give them if they kind of wanted to pursue a career like you have?
Well, I think it all starts with optimism, because the rest you'll find in the music business anyway. Then, and so that's something that you cannot plant into someone, right? So my parents never forced me to do this or to do that. So I kind of had the chance just to follow what I loved. The interest never left me up to this day. So, but once you have that interest, you just following it, and it's the door opening there. I think, but these days it's getting more tough as we progress. Different kinds of how to say that. Well, it's free. You can download. You can watch on YouTube. You don't need a teacher. If you want, so you can watch clips and blah blah blah. So I think you really have to really work hard and be flexible. Maybe constantly work on new skills, like learn how to make a website, or learn how to play not only clarinet but also saxophone and flute, or maybe piano. So I think the more diverse you are, the more chances you have to to end up having work. And I mean, this goes back to even the famous guys in the 80s or 70s or whatever. They had not only skill in one field, or luck, but they had to be prepared for different kinds of scenarios. So, and then of course listen to as much music as you can, and maybe go to a bigger city if you're from a small place where not too much is going on. And yeah, if I can speak for jazz, it's mostly listening, and but it's getting harder and harder these days, because you have all those books out, and you don't need to transcribe anymore by yourself. You can just kind of let someone else doing it, but actually there's no shortcut, and I'm really glad that my teachers what's the word, insisted that I transcribed, that I had to do this, to do that, because then you really learn how to focus in. And
Yeah. Speaking of learning flute, just a side question. I've seen some of your videos where you're practicing and demonstrating how to play the clarinet like a flute. Where did you pick up that skill, and
but,
and how long did it take you to learn it?
well, I think I heard it many many years ago. Someone did that on the concert, and then I went home and tried to do it by myself, of course. But it's a tricky thing, because you're blowing too hard the first couple of, I don't know, days. You start to get dizzy. So, but well, again, for me, it was just a systematical. You learn clarinet, you systematically you start to compose. You have I don't know, Dixieland band, swing band, bebop band, free jazz band. You just try on every aspect to go further, to learn. The same with the clarinet. I started to do those mouthpiece exercises with the piano and expand my range there. And the same happened with the flute sound. I just kept experimenting. And actually, I used it once. My first solo concert was in 2 years ago, I think. It's on YouTube too, where I played a solo program and just clarinet and loops. And then you really have to have something to do for, in my case, it was 40 minutes, and just like to have different aspects of the instrument and different sounds, colors, and so that flute sound came in very handy, to use that word again.
Yeah. So I'd like to shift, just for time, I'd like to shift and ask you about, you are the European Clarinet Association Jazz Chairman, correct? The ECA?
Well, yeah, that's trying to be. Yeah, right. Right.
So tell me a little bit about that, and what are your, what are your duties, and what would you like to do with the position?
I haven't done much since then. I just not too long ago, I came up with that idea also to the ICA that I would like to be more involved with the clarinet lobby, if you want. So because I started at jazz clarinet interviews, right,
Mhm.
and just wanted to somehow promote the instrument to players and maybe writing articles. So I mean, like you're doing now, right? So that's it's interesting, and I wanted to enter that field. So I called them up, Stefan, and maybe the jazz guy here at the ECA, and he said, "Yeah, let's give it a try." And so I will try to, um, I don't know, to share posts that are jazz related, or to make a link to the interviews that I did, for example, as well, just because they are serving that purpose. And just I thought more of it as when people are want to join like an association, and but they are mostly classical players. Maybe they are not sure is this the right place for them to ask a question or member, or so I thought it will be interesting for me to get in touch with all those people who are into improvised music, and maybe to spotlight that a little bit. So I will do. I haven't done anything yet except posting our video from today. They maybe we'll find out who is that guy that wants to do something there.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Actually, I do want to speak about these interviews. You interviewed a massive amount of people. So when I looked on YouTube, I think you have 131 interviews, which is a huge project. Can you tell me a little bit about how you decided to do this and why you think it's important to do that?
Yeah, I mean, it started. I think it was July last year. Could have been, yeah. So, well, we are all stuck at home, and I thought it would be great to get in touch with all the guys that are doing more or less the same that I'm involved in. So, and also to give people a voice. I mean, I had the top 5 players, let's say, on the show too, like guys like Paquito Rivera or Eddie Dan or Bob Mainzer, or I mean, guys that everybody already knows. But then there are tons of people that are um, playing great. Yeah, they're tip of the iceberg. It's the same with in every field, I guess. And so it's just a lot of fun to talk to everyone, like in a loose kind of way. I didn't have fancy intros with sponsored by, or just called those people up and had a chat, and somehow people responded to it positively, and they liked it. I think also the younger generation, for example, I don't know, maybe teenagers that are coming up, maybe they never had a chance to hear a view of so many players playing the same instrument that he does or she does.
Yeah, so you started in July. How were you able to fit in 131 interviews? That's massive. I was assuming it was a much longer project.
Well, well, you do the math. How
Yeah.
many days has a year, right? So I was kind of lazy. Only 130.
Yeah, yeah.
There were
Well,
days when I did two,
that's amazing.
but
That's amazing.
yeah,
So why do you think,
yeah. But
oh,
I'm still looking for. I'm still looking for. I'm still looking for the continent of Africa. I couldn't. I didn't have. It's interesting also to figure out people by their countries, and I couldn't find so far, like from Africa, like some players that are playing whatever it is. So I'm still searching for new clients.
all right, that's wonderful. How do you find how do you find your interviewees? I mean, some of them I assume you know, some of them are big
Mhm.
names, but what kinds of things were you looking for when you were searching for people to interview?
You mean how did I find them?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Are you friends with all of them?
Um, well, unfortunately not, but most of them I met. So, yeah. Um, well, it's we all have Google, right? We all have social media. We all have all those channels. So if somebody's out there and has done at least a couple of things, you will notice it. So so it was with that, and then I to check them out to see if the playing is to a certain level that I thought makes sense. I will not interview every college student that plays in the jazz band. So yeah, so somehow it evolved like that, so that a lot of people I'm aware of course, and other people I never met, or some people I met before, and it was a mix.
Yeah. Why do you think
Mhm.
it's important for you to do this? Why do you think getting this these kinds of interviews on record is helpful, maybe for the jazz clarinet in a bigger picture?
Yeah, well, actually, I thought in about aspirations or things like that, but it basically comes down to that it is a lot of fun to do. To talk to other guys or gals that are doing the same thing and to find out and have a nice phone call. So I mean, it's not that easy. It's not just a selfish thing, but I like to do that. So otherwise, I would not do it, to be honest, right? So, but of course, I see that it is interesting for other people to say, "Oh, well, I never heard of that guy, or I never knew that that guy studied with that guy." Or, I mean, it's history there too, but it's not. You have to force it to become something. But if people like it, great. If not, I'm doing it anyway.
Very good. Good. Would you say that that's kind of how you approach your career in general? If you like, you're going to do it anyway, if you like it, and if other people enjoy it, that's
Sure, sure. Nobody's waiting for you. Yeah. Sure, nobody's waiting for you. You have to do it if you want. If you don't want, nobody gives either. I mean, I didn't get a beep, but yeah. So it is. Yeah, I'm approaching like that. So yeah, you have to be very secure. And but let's say, for in my case, I'm my biggest fan, but also my biggest critic. So but it's only working like that, I guess, because otherwise, if you're depending, if somebody else likes what you're doing, I don't know how long the road will be.
Mhm.
And so yeah, just fascinated with something, and then just go for it, and the rest knows.
Did you gain any ideas
Mm.
for possible projects through your interviews yourself?
You mean collaborations with the guys from the interviews, or what?
Yeah, well, let me expand a little bit on that. As I was listening to the interviews, I was learning about people I had never heard of, but also different types of improvisation and different styles of music. And it's inspired me to think
Mhm.
about ways that I can incorporate that into my artistry. Were there
Mm.
any people you interviewed that inspired you for maybe planted an idea that you're thinking about? And um, how helpful were the interviews to you uh, for coming up with ideas?
Mhm. I don't want to sound arrogant, but it was not that I came across something that I had a like an aha moment, or um, there was just one guy that mentioned he practices with the metronome laying on the table, and he kind of swung unevenly. So I thought, well, what a freak that is. Maybe I will try that once. But other than that, it was just everybody has their story, and I mean, all know the fingering, right?
Hmm.
So I think that we all cook with water. So I'm not sure if that's the correct saying in English, but so it really comes down to just learn the instrument, and in the thing that I'm doing with improvisation and jazz, it's really about um, of course playing in all the keys, but take a motive and or find the same lines of notes in another chord. So it's a constantly growing thing, and a skill that you can polish. And it was just the interesting thing was that some guys I interviewed, they were playing more the old style of jazz, if I'm allowed to say so, like from the New Orleans tradition, and or swing, and or even before. And and that was very interesting to see. I mean, I had some klezmer guys on because I kind of expanded my interviews to just the clarinet in improvised music, as far as as long as it's not written down on the paper. So just amazing to see how versatile the people are, the musicians, and the instrument that you can find in so many different genres. And so that was, for me, I think the most interesting part so far.
Yeah, so something that I saw on your webpage is that, you know, many people consider the golden age of jazz clarinets to have passed. Um,
Mhm.
what do you think a new golden age for jazz clarinet looks like, and how do you think you can lead the jazz clarinet to become uh, to step into the limelight again?
Well, I guess like over over the years, the music got louder and louder. Like first, there were no amplifiers for guitar, for bass. Everything was acoustic. Then it changed to electric, to keyboards, to everything. So I mean, no chance for the clarinet, to be honest, right? So, but today, with today's technology, like with pickup mics and all kinds of gear, you actually can compete with the volume wise, with a drummer, with a keyboard player. So I think so. You have to go with time, I guess, to use that gear too. To, for example, you mentioned Spiketronics. I used um, effect pedals, or I used this. It's a small company in Germany, Rumberger. I make these microphones inside the instrument. You plug in, and you have a really direct signal. And I think things like that are very useful to finally make it happen. That you can play and be heard. And so that's what I think is one way to go, like to really take the instrument and electrify it too, as it happened with the electric guitar that is so popular. I mean, if you plug out that electric guitar from the amp, I mean it's nothing, right? So and the same I mean, once you have that volume done, and a lot of sound is coming out that helps you a lot to achieve the kind of sound that you want to play. I mean, that's my personal opinion. If somebody wants to bring back Dixieland to be the limelight, well, that's great too. But I don't know. I mean, it also depends on the audience, right? I mean, the jazz party audience is 70, 80, 90. So I guess the younger generation probably responds more to a kind of groovy sound in the first place, and maybe later discovers more sophisticated jazz. So.
Do you think that there's going to be a resurgence of jazz clarinetists in or let me rephrase it. Do you believe you are an inspiration? And if you are, what do you think that you are, how you can inspire the next generation to continue this jazz tradition?
Well, I try to be nice if somebody comes up and asks. Doesn't happen too often, I have to admit, but they ask for advice or something, because I mean, ultimately it's a great thing when you hear somebody else playing great. You know, when you start out, like when I was 20 and young and arrogant, I just was interested that I sound good, and I didn't want to find out about other guys or how to do what they are doing. But the longer you live, it comes down to, I mean, what a great thing if you hear somebody else playing your instrument, what you're doing great and inspiring, and just be more open and giving, and not trying to hide something from someone. So every time somebody asks me, I'm trying to give my best to what advice I can give, or how to listen to what, or how I did this, or could be anything, because yeah.
Are there common questions that people ask for advice about? Do you find that, you know, people are asking similar questions, and what are some of the common things that people are curious about?
Well, the one thing that you mentioned is that when you listen to some of my things, that you like the sound, and most of the times it's the sound thing, which has to do with the microphone, you know, not just with myself that is trying to get that classical round whatever tone out of the instrument, but that's the biggest compliment. I have constantly people or bandmates coming up to me and saying, or like from the audience, that say, you know, usually I don't like the clarinet, but man, that sound was great. So then I think that's the main thing, so that they somehow like the sound, or a special technique, but there are no secrets, you know. I mean, if you're interested in someone, you will figure it out by yourself, or you ask someone who's already doing it. So
yeah, good. So do you have any kind of just to wrap it up, do you have any advice? I'm going to ask three questions here. Do you have any advice for people who want to get started in using the electronics? Say a college student wants to begin experimenting with microphones. Do you have any advice on where to get started?
you're talking about microphone or about the pedals, or
All of it.
both?
Any of
All of it.
the equipment. How can someone get started in experimenting with this? Or what, you know, they can afford one piece of equipment every couple months. What should they start with?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would start with the Rumberger microphone, really, to get drilled a hole into your barrel, buy that microphone, plug it in, plug it to a guitar amp or to a PA or whatever, and I think that's the most important thing, because you use that also for the pedals on later on. But I'm really a beginner with those pedals. I'm really not an expert. I just trial and error. So, but there's a great website I can send you the link. They deal with help, and they published books about which pedals work for woodwind players and how to plug it in and plug it out. But I couldn't do that by myself because I'm relying on that too, because I didn't master that skill. I would like to have someone else doing that so I can focusing on the playing, you know.
Okay, so best advice, hire someone. Yeah, that's wonderful. And I
Yeah,
think,
get your own roadie. Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think that website would be really helpful to a lot of people who are interested in
Mm-hmm.
starting to experiment with that kind of those sounds. And then, do you have any advice for people who are maybe classical players that want to begin learning how to improvise, learning how to play in combos and bands as a jazz player?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, since we all have to look for different ways of performing or making money, I I'm offering that to classical players, that because that's what I would love to do. Because as I told before, there are no secrets. There is no not. I mean, there is still those two worlds a bit too much apart, but it really can open doors. And I think I posted that a couple of days ago that I'm offering that to that I'm interested to offer that. Um, because you don't even have to go to jazz necessarily. You can just learn. I mean, it starts, for example, learning those scales not by reading those fat books, you know, where it is written in all keys, right? But just memorize what you're doing. Or arpeggios, close, whatever. um, it can set you free, really, on the instrument, and you can learn a lot, and you don't even have to play jazz necessarily. I mean, you can just improvise with no. You can learn how to improvise in Baroque music, but uh, so that's something if you can, I would like to offer to people who are coming from the classical side with the clarinet, and they would like to be more free, or would like to start to play jazz. Um, so that's my advice. I mean, or just I mean, get a teacher, get a book, somehow get started. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great
Was
advice.
that your question?
Yeah, that was my question. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And my final question, as far as advice, is uh, for people who are looking to get into studio work. I know you do a lot of commercial performing. What is the best way to break into that industry for you, or do you have any advice for them?
No, not really, because that thing is kind of, well, it's not over. But I mean, when I was studying, I had a composing arranging teacher who studied in LA, Dick Grove Music School, and it was a different time, of course, with more studio scene and studio musicians. And I actually wanted to become one, so that's how I got into this. And then you meet people, you meet composers, you're it starts like that. Well, at least in my case, it started like that. And you have this guy composes for that, and you meet this one. He makes a movie. Or this one makes a commercial for shampoo. But I mean, there's not really. I mean, if you're playing the clarinet and you want to try your luck, become a studio musician, I think, I don't know. I mean, you have to play all the horns. I mean, clarinet, flute, all the clarinets, all the saxophones. I mean, and of course there are guys around already for many years that are doing that, so there is no empty chair at all, so you can just try by yourself. I mean, and the toughest cats, they even play bassoon and oboe. They play just a truck full of instruments, and they are ready for whatever you want to do them.
Yeah, that's great advice. So meet everyone
Yeah, learn a new
and learn
instrument.
everything. Yeah, great.
Yeah, use the pandemic to use some more instruments.
Yeah, it's time to practice. So, well, thank you so much for meeting with me. Are there any things that you kind of want to add about what you're doing right now, where they can find your interviews and where they can find more information about you?
Well, yeah, I mean, well, first of all, thank you very much for that initiative for doing that with me. I really enjoyed talking to you and trying my best to explain what I'm doing and what I'm not doing, and I can send you the links. And I mean, I have a website, of course. I mean, basically, if you type my name into YouTube, you will find my YouTube channel. If you type it into Google, you will find tons of material. So I think that's not the problem if someone is interested in. Um, but no, other than that, I just enjoyed talking about what I love to do.
Yeah, it was really a pleasure. I am so inspired by a lot of the work that you're doing. And I know that many of my students
Nice to hear.
are so excited about it. I teach a lot of the jazz studies saxophonists, and I know that
Mm-hmm.
they're very
Mm-hmm.
interested in the sounds that you're getting. So thank you so much for all the work you do for the clarinet community and all the contributions you make and all the inspiration you give. So it was really a pleasure.